Good evening. Tonight we bring you a landmark decision from the highest court in the land, one that could reshape the future of American trade policy and presidential authority. The United States Supreme Court has struck down a wide range of tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, ruling them an illegal overreach of executive power. This historic verdict sends shockwaves through Washington and the global economic community. The decision specifically targets tariffs enacted under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, or IEEPA, a law originally designed to give presidents tools to respond to international crises. This marks a rare and significant break between the judiciary and the executive branch on a key economic policy, highlighting the ongoing debate over the limits of presidential power. Businesses and trade groups have long argued these tariffs caused economic harm without proper legal authority, leading to uncertainty and higher costs for American companies and consumers alike. The justices concluded the administration failed to demonstrate the unusual and extraordinary threat required by IEEPA, fundamentally reshaping the balance of power between Congress and the White House on matters of trade and economic intervention. The ruling directly challenges a policy central to President Trump's approach to global economics, raising questions about the future of executive-led trade actions. While tariffs were intended to protect American industries and jobs, critics say they ultimately raised costs for consumers, disrupted supply chains, and triggered foreign retaliation, impacting everyday Americans. The court's intervention now forces a national reckoning on the scope of presidential power in global commerce, and may set a precedent for future administrations. The decision is celebrated by importers and free trade advocates who see it as a victory for constitutional checks and balances. But for tariff supporters, it's a setback that could spark a constitutional showdown and reshape America's role in the world economy. To grasp the Supreme Court's ruling, we need to understand tariffs. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, paid by the importer and often passed down to consumers. Tariffs are meant to make foreign products more expensive, encouraging people to buy American-made goods. While they can help certain industries, tariffs also raise costs for manufacturers who rely on imported parts, making their products less competitive. Retaliation from other countries can hurt American exporters, especially farmers. Ultimately, tariffs act as a broad tax on the economy, raising prices for everyday items. The effects ripple through global supply chains, impacting sectors far beyond those targeted. The debate centers on protecting specific jobs versus the broader economic costs. This conflict is at the heart of America's current trade policy debate. The Supreme Court's decision hinged on interpreting the IEEPA, which lets the president regulate commerce during true national emergencies. The administration argued trade deficits were such a threat, justifying tariffs. The court disagreed, saying trade deficits don't meet the law's high standard for emergency action. The majority opinion clarified that IEEPA was meant for genuine emergencies, not routine trade disputes. The court ruled that imposing broad tariffs is a power reserved for Congress, not the president. This decision reasserts the separation of powers fundamental to American government. The ruling signals stricter limits on executive authority, regardless of who's in the White House. If the nation is to engage in a trade war, it must be rooted in clear legal authority from Congress. Tariffs have created winners and losers across the U.S. economy. Some industries, like steel and aluminum, benefited from protection and higher prices, but most manufacturers faced higher costs for imported parts, making their products pricier and less competitive. These costs were often passed on to consumers, raising prices on everything from appliances to furniture. Studies show the burden of tariffs fell mostly on American importers and families. The result: higher household expenses and inflationary pressure. Retaliation from other countries, especially China, hit U.S. farmers hard, closing off key export markets. Many farmers faced financial losses and increased reliance on government aid. The ripple effects of tariffs show that trade actions rarely happen in isolation. In a global economy, one move can trigger far-reaching consequences. Despite the Supreme Court's ruling, the Trump administration isn't backing down. Instead, it's shifting its legal strategy to Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which allows tariffs for national security reasons. This provision gives the president broad discretion, as national security can be interpreted widely. The Commerce Department is already investigating critical industries like semiconductors and pharmaceuticals under this new authority. The The likely result, new or layered tariffs, now justified as protecting security interests. This pivot sidesteps the Supreme Court's decision and keeps uncertainty alive for global trade. Businesses hoping for relief now face more unpredictability. Legal battles will continue as opponents challenge the use of national security for economic protectionism. The era of unpredictable trade policy is far from over. The tariff war has had a direct and far-reaching impact on the price and availability of everyday goods, touching nearly every corner of the American economy. Initial tariffs on steel and aluminum raised costs for car makers, beverage companies, and construction firms. These industries rely heavily on imported metals, so even a small increase in material costs can ripple through the supply chain, ultimately raising prices for consumers. The scope soon expanded to consumer goods, especially furniture, with tariffs as high as 50% planned for some items. Retailers and manufacturers scrambled to adjust, often passing increased costs directly to shoppers. New tariffs on lumber will drive up home construction and renovation costs, adding thousands to the price of a new house. For families hoping to buy or remodel, these added expenses can be a major setback. Commerce Secretary Lutnick now has broad authority to expand tariffs to other wood products, affecting everything from flooring to picture frames. This means even small home improvement projects could become noticeably more expensive. Layered tariffs create a compounding effect, making business planning nearly impossible. Companies struggle to predict costs, and uncertainty can stall investment and hiring. Importers face taxes on raw materials, components, and finished goods, each under different legal authorities. Navigating this complex web of regulations adds time and expense to every transaction. The result: higher prices for cars, furniture, and homes. These increases are often unavoidable, leaving consumers with fewer affordable options. The real-world impact of tariffs is increasingly visible and costly for everyone. Families, small businesses, and entire communities are feeling the strain as budgets tighten. Americans are feeling the effects in their wallets and daily lives as the cost of living continues to climb and financial pressures mount for households across the country. America's trading partners are watching the Supreme Court's ruling with intense interest, knowing that the outcome could reshape the global trade landscape for years to come. Both the ruling itself and the administration's response are being scrutinized closely by foreign governments and international markets. Hopes for an end to U.S. protectionism faded quickly, sending ripples of uncertainty through financial markets worldwide. The White House, doubling down, vowed to maintain tariffs under new legal grounds, signaling no immediate change in policy. Major economies now face a difficult choice: wait for new U.S. court challenges to play out, or take matters into their own hands and retaliate. Some may file disputes at the World Trade Organization, seeking to resolve conflicts through international law and arbitration. Others could impose their own tariffs on American goods, escalating tensions and raising the stakes for global commerce. Allies like Canada, Mexico, and Japan, caught in the crossfire, may coordinate their response to present a united front against U.S. measures. Some countries may even look to diversify away from U.S. markets, seeking new trade partners and alternative supply chains. The global reaction will likely mix careful diplomacy with strategic repositioning, as nations weigh their options. Most countries are reluctant to escalate trade wars, knowing the risks to their own economies. But at the same time, they can't afford to ignore U.S. actions that threaten their interests. Expect a flurry of diplomatic activity in the coming weeks, as countries consult allies and strategize their next moves. At the same time, supply chains may begin to shift away from the U.S., as companies hedge against future disruptions. The uncertainty could have lasting consequences, affecting investment decisions and economic growth around the world. America's global economic position is now more uncertain than ever, as partners reconsider their ties. The world is recalibrating its trade relationships, adapting to a new era of unpredictability. In response to U.S. unpredictability, nations are rethinking their strategies and alliances. America's role in the global economy is at a crossroads, and the world is watching to see what happens next. The future of U.S. trade policy is more uncertain than ever. The Supreme Court's decision hasn't ended the conflict. It's just shifted the fight to new legal grounds. Businesses face ongoing instability, making planning difficult. For consumers, continued tariffs mean persistent inflation and higher prices. Internationally, America risks isolating itself and losing influence as partners seek alternatives. The administration's tactics could backfire, leaving the U.S. with fewer favorable trade relationships. Congress could step in to clarify or limit presidential power on tariffs, but political divisions make action tough. For now, the world watches as the administration pushes forward and the courts draw new lines. The global trade landscape is being redrawn in real time. The only certainty is that uncertainty will define the road ahead.